All right, World War III update. This one's going to be interesting. Uh, wow, where do I start with this one? Now, you're going to have to kind of keep a bit of an open mind on this because even though I myself do not argue from a religious point of view, I know others do, but we also have to factor in not so much we believe ourselves or don't believe ourselves, but what others may, and some of the people in power, what they actually might believe, from anything from the second coming of Christ, anything from satanic beliefs, any sort of thing like that, or they may have no belief systems at all, or they might be believing in Muslim end times prophecies. We have to factor all these things in. I just want to put it out there because I know some people tend to want to shut off as soon as things start getting religious, but what I'm saying is this is the world we live in, and we have to factor in everything that's going on, because it is all significant. Even the minute details might not seem like much, but it could be a huge catalyst for what I think in 2016 we're probably going to see something spectacular. And I'm not saying that in a, oh wow, hey, that's great. I'm saying we're going to see something that's going to shock and awe us. We're going to see something I'm almost guaranteed will have to make the mainstream media news everywhere. There will be no avoiding it whatsoever because of what's currently going on. Now, it seems like things have died down for the Christmas holidays, but they haven't. In fact, everything's going full bore. In fact, things are really going full bore. Uh, about a week ago, John Kerry made another trip to Russia, and this was pretty much probably on the heels of statements from Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, after the Russian jet got shut down, talked about the stab in the back by Turkey and et cetera, et cetera. Turkey right now is building up, missile defense systems. They got tanks going. They're scrambling in panic right now as they're dealing with the Kurdish uprising, which, if you haven't been noticing, the Kurdish uprising is starting to get a little bit more public now. And there's a unique thing happening in Turkey, where the East, the West, everybody is right now bashing Turkey. In other words, Turkey just got thrown under the bus as a scapegoat. What that means is that NATO, yes, technically is still, Turkey is still a part of NATO, but NATO is kind of squirming away slowly from Turkey. You had the removal of the F-15, U.S. F-15 jets that were stationed in Turkey. They came home. Media all over the place is kind of bashing Turkey for supporting ISIS. Pilots in the U.S. military are really ticked off, in the Air Force, that have been told for the last past year and a half that even some of them have been blowing the whistle, apparently, saying that they were not allowed to attack the oil convoys. Obama's excuse was he didn't want to increase global warming. Literally, that was the excuse. It was he didn't want to impact the environment. That's why they didn't want to go after the oil. No, they didn't want to go after the oil because the oil is where they're making the money. Going across to Turkey, selling that oil and et cetera, and funding ISIS. So pretty much, U.S. media, European media, all Russian media are all pretty much fingering Turkey right now, and this is significant. This is very significant because this is also what I said, and again, I said this a long time, even before the Russians got into Syria, that they would get into Syria, start at one end of the country, and just sweep the whole damn thing and fleece it free of jihadists. And countries around it would, pay the consequences for this. There's no doubt about that, because you have jihadists. The United Nations apparently just was delayed in removing, basically, you might as well say, ISIS fighters from Aleppo. Basically, moderate rebels. They still call them moderate rebels, right? But they said they were going to be delayed for that 24-hour or 48 or 72-hour ceasefire that Assad had, basically giving people amnesty to get out of there. But they said these jihadists can't get out of there, and basically the United Nations can't get them out. So why would they want to get them out? You know what I mean? That's the thing. Another thing is, and I don't know much about this man at all, but a journalist in Turkey was just assassinated, basically shot in the face, I guess from point blank, from a bunch of people in a vehicle, that was exposing the ISIS ring with Turkey. Now, you have to understand also in Turkey that it's very, the Kurdish uprisings are getting very, very violent. So I'm thinking what's going to happen in Turkey is they're just, this could be the Russians, maybe they'll back the Kurds on the other end. But you also have the Iraqis out there that are basically not going along with the U.S. Remember a couple of months ago, the United States told the Iraqis that if they open their borders to the Russians, uh, they may treat Iraq, basically as a hostile nation again. But the Iraqis haven't bid on this. They're like, what have they got to lose at this point, right? So they're still out there, talking about these airdrops going into to arm the rebels. Again, they're showing all these weapons that are making it. These aren't things that the rebels are just coming across naturally or stealing. No, these are being airdropped by helicopter, low level, meaning you can't mistake who you're dropping to, because if let's put it to you this way, and if you're a surface veteran, you know this. Let's say you're flying along in a Chinook, a Huey, or a Black Hawk, okay, and you're at, I don't know, we'll say 500 feet. What happens to your helicopter as soon as you fly over hostile jihadists? They shoot at you, right? They'll shoot at you with whatever they got. They'll throw rocks at you. They'll yell at, they'll try anything. So you're not going to be flying above the building tops, above these jihadists without being shot at. So these helicopters are not getting shot at. There's no reports of these helicopters getting shot at. So there's only one reason why these helicopters are not getting shot at, because they're dropping off supplies. And this is what the Iraqis have been talking about. And there is some footage of it. Yes, I get it. It disappears quickly. Again, we are in a media war as well. But there's another thing, is the Iraqis, they're still trying, they're still angry about the Turks invading their country. They're like, we don't want your help, we don't want you here because you guys basically support ISIS. So that's going on. All this stuff is going on, and it's really exposing how failed the plan is. But that's not the big news. The big news is that Vladimir Putin apparently went to Israel, and in the last past week or so, to basically, from this guy's more conspiracy theory, and I can't vet anything he was saying, but he was saying something along the lines of to stop World War III. So, okay, fair enough. I can't vet that at all, right? So what I can vet is the reaction Putin had of the shooting down of the Russian jet a few weeks ago, when he then had S-300, S-400, and now coming online in Russia is the S-500 missile system. All these things are set up. They're put into play. But there's a few big things that have come out of this. And this came from Assad himself. I heard him say it in his interview, is that, and maybe I mentioned it before, maybe I did, but this is big news too. One of the big things, okay, is that we see the Israelis doing strikes in Syria left, right, and center. And a couple of days ago, about 20 Iraqi soldiers were killed in U.S. strikes. And there was another rebel leader that was killed, one that was actually fighting ISIS, again killed by U.S. strikes. So I think the Iraqis had enough. I think the Iraqis are going to be definitely on the side of the Russians from here on out. This is where the Syria is now slipping out of the hands of the Zionists and the West. They've lost Syria, because now we know that the Israelis and the coalition forces, the U.S. and whoever, have attacked Assad's army time and time again. Lots of airstrikes taking out Assad's troops. We know this. And we know why they're doing it, so that, to overthrow Assad. Regime change is openly admitted by Obama, the entire administration, and that's all they care about. They don't care about ISIS as an enemy. That's their proxy army. We have CIA whistleblowers out there talking about that as well, that these are the most effective guys to fight to overthrow Assad. But now the rhetoric has changed. So Assad has been turning the other cheek. This is why he's lasted so long. Because if he would have fought back against either the Israelis or the Americans or any of the United Nations forces that are in there, and shot down any airplanes or anything like that, it would give the green light to NATO to go into Syria, completely overthrow the Syrian army, and then overthrow Assad, and then we'd have a regime change, and then on to Iran we would go for the next big war, until we can get into the big war with Russia. But however, with the Russian air power, and now the Russian, although in small forces, being backed up by the T-90 tanks and stuff like that. The U.S. made TOW missiles that came from Saudi Arabia are not effective against the T-90 tanks. They're hitting the tanks, but they're not damaging. They're not destroying the tanks because of the way that the T-90 active and reactive armor is. It kind of is designed. Those little briquettes are designed to defeat TOW missiles. The best way to defeat a TOW missile is if it can never hit the tank in the first place. So these briquettes actually blow off before they can even hit the tank and destroy the weapon. So this is devastating. So now you have Russian air power in there, but you also have not very many, but a handful of very qualified Russian tanks in there. And of course you have the Cuban army that's training up the Syrian tank crews and stuff like that. And all this is going on. And of course you have Hezbollah and Lebanon. We have S-300 missile systems now in Lebanon, meaning this is a really close to Syria, to Israeli borders. So the Israelis, we've also, and these slime bag Zionists told them a couple of weeks ago, there's a little footage out here. I can't say exactly how old this footage is. It's probably a couple of decades old, of Netanyahu talking to some rabbis trying to get the second, saying, hurry up, we need the second coming. Meaning of they want Armageddon, and he's, I'm working on it, So there's that interesting footage anyway. So we have to understand that there is a agenda here. What the grand agenda is, we can speculate, because there's so many factions at the top here that are fighting for different things. Some are doing it for religious, some are doing it for hegemony, some are doing it for monopoly. There's a whole list of corruption up there, regardless of what it is. Now, the thing is that Assad came out and said, we're going to defend our airspace now. That basically, because Putin has already come out and said, look, we put the S-300 missile systems in to defend our aircraft in there. The last thing we were expecting is to have our airplanes shot down, and particularly in areas where they'd flown several times, and not only that, they flown in that area, but they were only in the Turkish airspace for 17 seconds. There's no, and they also had figured out that yes, the Turks used American satellites to guide the F-16s and stuff like that. They basically could not have shot down the Russian fighters without the help of the U.S. The Russians have exposed this. Now, that said, you might say, well, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's Red Scare or not. It is. The thing is not whether it's true or not. It's what is the reaction to it. Well, Putin is now, we heard him a week or two ago when he did his 3-hour address to the nation. One of the things he said is, now we have the S-300 missile system in there. Now we have the S-400 missile systems in there. Try shooting us down now. And he's also given the green light to shoot down any airplane, and basically meaning NATO airplanes, US airplanes, whatever. If we're under threat or attack, they got the green light. The Russians can go ahead. I mean, we're talking basically real opening, big-time opening shots of World War III. We've already got the opening shots of World War III. The Turkish shoot down of the jet is the opening shot. But I'm talking like 20 airplanes get blown out of the sky in one sitting type of thing. The Russians are now got the green light to do that. Yes, the game has stepped up. So Kerry now goes over to Russia, and basically whoa, slow down, So what is basically going to happen is Syria is now, again, like I said from the beginning, this actually is a de-escalation from war, believe it or not. Putin still hasn't played the crazy man like North Korea yet, and he will. I think we're probably going to see a nuclear detonation in 2016 just to show that they're serious. And right after that, if the West keeps going, then we're getting into it. That's it. Yes, the economies are bad in China, the economies are bad in the States, and the economies are bad globally. So there is a lot of incentive for these guys to go to war. That's what because if they can go to war, they can blame the economic collapse on Russia or China. But Russia and China will not strike first. Now, somebody might say, yes, but if Russia shoots down NATO airplanes, that'll invoke Article 5. Not necessarily, because even though, yes, NATO would do it, many NATO nations would probably back out because they say, no, you provoked a war. If they shoot down NATO airplanes in Syria, remember, they have no legal means to be in Syria. It's an illegal war. Even by the own United Nations, which is as corrupt as they are, as corrupt as NATO is, they are in Syria illegally. Only the Russians have been invited into Syria. That's it. Well, Assad's a dictator. It doesn't matter. They did not get international approval to go in. Only the Russians have. Therefore, if they shoot down airplanes over Syria, I think you'll have a military revolt in the United States, i.e., a military coup. In fact, I think we've been seeing several of them, but just not in the front. Um, the military is more awake in the United States than we give them credit for. They know what's going on because they're on the front lines. They understand these are bankers' wars at this point. Maybe not all of them, but the people that are the commanding, they know that when they're provoking war with Russia. Yes, they're ready for war with Russia, but they know they're provoking. You got guys like Rand Paul out there exposing it, uh, that type of thing. Now the thing is that the Russians right now are saying, back off or else. Okay, they're really saying back off or else. The Russians, and I'm no Putin fan. I'm not a Putin lover. I don't trust him. Trust me, he's in there for his own interest. It just happens to work out in favor for the Syrian people. But don't kid yourself. He's in there for his own interest. And the thing about that is, you now have a situation where the Syrians have the green light to shoot down NATO airplanes. The Iraqis are compliant with the Russians and the Syrians because they want it gone. The Iranians now have the S-300 missile system. Lebanon has the S-300 missile system. So basically, they're creating this missile defense system that really puts at odds for control that area. Now you're saying, yeah, but NATO can take Russia, and okay, fine, but you're missing the point. Who do you think in that region of the world is going to get thrown under the bus? Who do you think the Russians are going to take out first? Now you probably say they would never do it. If it came down to it, they would probably use a proxy to do this, and I think they're going to use a proxy a little bit later on. Remember, Hezbollah now has tanks. But the thing is this: they will probably most likely take out Israel. That's the trump card. This is why Israel's saying, this is why Israel came out and said a couple of weeks ago, if the United States and you get into a war in Syria, we're going to stay out of it. The cowards that they are, they want to start the war, but they don't want to finish it. They want to train up all these jihadists to overthrow Assad, but it doesn't matter. They're going to get thrown under they are, they're going to be ripped apart from within anyway. But the point is this: that's Russia's trump card. You screw with us, we wipe Israel off the map, saying they'd never do it. Well, here's the other thing, and this is probably, kind of like the 1-2 punch to certify that they're going to take over Syria. And Syria is now, regime change is off the table. Yes, they're going to have to go back. It doesn't mean that the Zionists are going to give up on this idea. It's just their plan isn't working. So in other words, ISIS is a failed attempt. It's not going to go through. The Russians will completely, and you could just see the leaps and bounds of progress that the Syrian army is making. They're taking their country back. But the thing is this: Putin also did another thing to really kind of nail this deal shut, so to speak, and very openly, and we've been seeing from the strategic command footage with Putin there in the past month or two, kind of showing some strange stuff, particularly with really showing how the cruise missiles are going to work and stuff like that. And he basically went to the general of the strategic command, and to ask about the nuclear triad, how it was doing, what was its status. The Russian nuclear triad is 95% ready. 95% ready. This is also why the U.S. is they're scrambling to get a nuclear program going. The triad basically is air, land, and sea. So their submarines are 95% ready. They've got another new Bory-class submarine just coming in online. Carries 16, Bulava missiles. These things very long range, 10 warheads each. We're talking, planet smashers, right? And we see that they got another new missile that came out. I think it's the RS-32 or something. Don't quote me on the number. It will be fired from Topol-Ms. These things are even different because they can come over the North Pole, but they can also take a different route down through the South Pole. And basically, these things will be uncounterable by anything NORAD has or anything, any sort of missile defense system. Basically, the Russians have stuff that can beat all U.S. missile defense systems and NATO defense missiles. So we can't defend against the Russians. That's their biggest trump card they have, is their nuclear arsenal. We can't defend against it. We can't stop it. The Patriot missile systems, the warheads coming in, bob and weave. They don't fly in a straight line. We can't stop what they have. And the Russians know this. There's another thing. Their S-400 and 500 missiles, anti-aircraft systems. The NATO still doesn't know how they work. They jam signals. They fried out signals on the U.S. Donald Cook about a year ago with an Su-24. They don't know what the Russians are using to do that. It's kind of like the A-6 intruder in Vietnam. They didn't know what kind of electronic warfare was jamming all the missiles. While the Russians have something, we don't know how it works. The S-300 and S-400 missile systems, yes, they're set up in the Arctic. They got them there. But the thing is what some have speculated why Turkey shot down the Russian jet could have been to see if they could get them to turn the missile systems on to see how they're operating. Because that's the thing, the radar part's on, but they don't know how it locks on. They don't know how it fries out electronics. They don't know how these systems are working. And there's no counter for these systems right now. These are the best missile system defense systems in the world against aircraft or whatever, and they're multifaceted. But the thing is this is not just speculation. This is coming officially from NATO analysts. It's official that they have said in Eastern Europe, no, they cannot take a Russian invasion in Eastern Europe. They would not. There was no way, no matter how they gamed it, there was no way to win against the Russians in the Baltics. No possible way. Air power is too great, missile systems too great. S-500 missile systems can not only shoot down missiles, but it could shoot them down over North America, meaning they have a long enough range that they can get here. Some of the missiles. Again, it's made up of many different missile systems, that type of thing. So the Russian missile defense is the big thing. They also have a new PAC bomber coming out. This thing, the concept of it has been floating around for a while. It looks like we're going to see some new Tu-160s. Again, this is like the ultimate of Cold Wars. The amount of equipment that's coming up. The Russians have claimed that by the year 2020 or 2018, they'll be 70% modernized. This is a big thing. This is a very big thing. So not only will the Russians have, yes, there will be in low numbers at first, but again, we know how Russia can turn up the production rate when they need to. So right now, the PAC FA-50, which I still say the Su-35 is a better airplane, but they have a stealth airplane. Now they're going to have this kind of potato-looking winged bomber. I have no idea what the dimensions on it, but it's going to be a new bomber that basically will be stealthier and much larger. So I don't know if it's going to be as large as the Tu-160 or the replacement for the Tu-160, but they are going to be building more Tu-160s. 16 of them on the planet I thought was enough, but the two divisions will be getting more, apparently 2 divisions will be getting more airplanes. So that's where we're at there. Yes, Russian submarine patrols are pretty high. We can't counter them right now. Right now, the Russians are ready to fight. They're ready to fight. Guys like Joe Skousen were saying, no, they're not ready to fight yet. Their production isn't up to what they need. That may be true, but again, Russians hold records in mass production when it comes to wartime. It doesn't matter what era. The most numerous aircraft ever built on the planet was the IL-52. Basically, there was a couple of versions of it. There was a single-seat attack version. These were in World War II. The most numerous battle tank ever built was the T-55, 95,000 of those. Most numerous jet fighter ever built, the MiG-21, and it goes on. The most, and yes, submarines. The Russians have more submarines than anybody else. The Kylo sub, which is currently still in service in many nations around the world, the most exported sub, diesel electric sub, and there's I think something like 200 of those that were made. So we get the idea that the Russians, when they want to produce things, they can produce things. Their modern fighters, yes, they're only in the thousands. But even at that, they're in the thousands. What they have in mothball versus what they have in service, yes, okay, the numbers are a lot dwindled. But you have to understand, mothball to frontline services is a routine maintenance upgrade away for most things, T-72s included. These things are being turned into all kinds of things. They're being turned into the TOS flamethrowers. They're being turned into these 30mm gun, remote vehicle type of thing. They've got stuff that they can use. They've got lots of cannon fodder without even putting a single human being in it. So the Russians have really strategized well here. Now that said, if the goal is to go to war, and if the Russians really wanted to go to war, we would have been in war in the Ukraine day two of the in the U.S. coup. But it's coming out now like, yes, the Ukraine economy is pretty much tanking uh, and stuff like that. And yes, the IMF has revamped their own rules so that they can bail out the Ukraine. Although they're telling Ukraine you don't have to pay the Russians back, but you have to pay us back, right? And they're getting more bailouts from the rest of the world or whatever. So Ukraine has failed too. So I think even though there was this kind of speculation out there, Paul Craig Roberts was talking about that. And there was a good interview that he did with Greg Hunter there the other day. It was really good, actually, and making some good key points about ISIS being a proxy army and all these terror attacks being false flags. He goes, first off, he says, if they were real terrorists, they would be going after the policymakers and these, the Zionists, basically. Paul Craig Roberts never used, too many terms like that. The neocons is usually as far as he'll go, but and it's true too. If the terrorists were real legitimate terrorists, they'd be taking out guys like George Soros, Brzezinski, Kissinger, Victoria Nuland, and all that. They would be taking those people out in a heartbeat because they're not really that well protected. So this tells you that they're going after like things that don't really need, like schools and hospitals and whatever, and theaters and what have you. Which, okay, whatever, but strategically, there's no value in hitting like the Paris attacks. There was no value in hitting a nightclub. You know what I mean? Like there was no value in that from the point of view. So it really, when you think about it, they're more for shock and awe. And again, it's to keep the narrative going and the agenda going. But the thing too is that the lunacy is starting to be countered. And I do believe we will probably see some sort of a U.S. military coup in the near future. These world elites are just too far gone. I do believe that, yes, Syria is a stabilizing move by the Russians because it blocks the war with Iran. Because you have to understand, after Iran falls, okay, we go to war with Russia and China. That's it. That's pretty much it. So the Russians know this. This is the final end game. Their eye is on the prize. They only have to do two things. Same with the Chinese: is sit and wait and watch for the U.S. economy to collapse. Nigeria is now doing trade in what you call it, Chinese dollars. They're moving away from the U.S. dollar. All these other countries are moving away. Now, Turkey was putting out their kind of plan for a rise of a kind of a new Ottoman Turk ranging from basically all northern Africa right through to the borders of China, but it's kind of falling apart. And the thing is that with the nuclear triad, okay, the Russians have put out kind of a statement on their propaganda channels, basically saying, okay, we know we only have 50 aircraft in Syria, and even with the S-300 and 400 missile systems, our aircraft there could be, our operations could be vulnerable there. But if you're considering that, and I've said this, whenever the U.S. does something, the Russians 10-up it. They don't 1-up it, they 10-up it. So what they have said is this: if you attack us, yes, there's no way you're right. You could take out all 50 of our aircraft, no problem, in Syria. You might lose a few in the process, but what you will really lose is that if you attack us there, we will take that as an actual part invasion. You will not take away our operations. What we will do is enact our missile systems, which again, meaning their nuclear missiles can attack. Think about the range of this: to attack from Russia and to come up through the South Pole to the United States. Think about that trip. These are systems that we can't counter those missiles at all. We have nothing to counter that. And we don't know right now how many Russian or pro-Russian troops or military support that they may have in South America. We don't know what they have. They have a hell of a trump card, because I'm sure they're not showing us their entire hand. I mean, just think about the announcement here of the nuclear triad being at 95%. Where did that come from? You know what I mean? But for those who follow this channel, the Russians have been lighting off nuclear ICBMs like the 4th of July and stuff like that. But we haven't seen a nuclear warhead detonation yet. We've seen dummy warhead tests throughout the year, which is common. The Russians do this, but it's the frequency and the publicity in which they're doing this that tells us that we're in pretty scary times. Now, here in Canada, where our problem is, and it's kind of Justin Trudeau's kind of not even kind of acknowledging that it's going on. He did say that he was willing to work with the Russians, not the same way Donald Trump was. It was just a hint. This was at the last, I think, G20 meeting and stuff like that, because he didn't make any provocative statements like Harper, pretty much telling Putin off to his face, calling him a liar or whatever. No, Justin Trudeau isn't doing that. Now, mind you, that's kind of a good thing, because maybe Justin Trudeau, I don't have much faith in the guy, but I do have to give him the benefit of the doubt, because I have to wait to see what his actions truly are. My fear is that if he guts our military too much, which little years are dark ages for our military. Basically, the Russians, they're already overwhelming us in firepower and other things. Now, the Russian plan has always been to come over the North Pole with the bombers, but a Russian invasion would have to go around Canada. To go through Canada would be too it'd be too expensive. You just couldn't move that many vehicles through Canada. You got to understand the distance it would take to get there. So that really, it's going to be east and west of the country that could be invaded. Because if they were to drop, I don't know, build air bases, they could build supply routes along the way in Canada. But to try to have an armored column go from Alaska then down through British Columbia, and so they'd get picked off before they'd ever get to the States. So obviously, no, they're not going to go there. And I don't think the Russians really consider Canadians as a threat military-wise. Navy bit, but even at that, they're more focused on the rest of NATO, and mostly focused on the United States. Because thing is they don't have to take the rest of NATO. They don't have to, they're not going to waste their time on us first, simply due to the fact that if they can take out the States, then the rest, they know the rest will just probably most likely back down naturally. This is probably what you're going to see in Eastern Europe, and you are kind of seeing, in not so direct ways, but the breakup of NATO with the new EU army that's just coming out. Now, yes, the new EU army is only like 1,500 to 2,500 people, but this is just kind of like year one, right? So yeah, NATO, I think, is going to go the way of the dodo, as well as the EU. You have over there in the Czech Republic, you have basically, pretty much the migration, the mass immigrant migrant crisis being shunned by country after country, including Hungary. Basically not Hungary, but Czech Republic Prime Minister out there saying, hey, yeah, by the way, we this is like the Trojan horse. We're not going to go into that kind of, we're not going to go with the EU policies. So people are rejecting the EU, they're rejecting NATO. The Russians have pretty much pulled a trump card in Syria, like I said they would, and doesn't mean that the U.S. isn't going to. They have to go back to the drawing board, and I'm not talking to the U.S. people. The U.S. people is probably one of the bigger things that is making the Zionists and the neocons go back to the drawing board, because they know that if they initiate a war with Russia, the U.S. people will probably rise up against the government. There will be no war with Russia. Maybe this could be the plan all along, is to destabilize the United States. But we also have to look at the biblical thing too. Is one of the things about U.S. foreign policy, and Paul Craig Roberts was talking about this a long time ago, is that it is designed to create as much hatred for the United States and Israel as possible. And if, again, flipping over to the Bible side of things, one of the things about end times prophecy is that all nations are supposed to turn their back on Israel, right? So, and there's another thing you have to factor in, that the Zionists believe they can invoke the Messiah at will. Okay, so it means whenever they believe the second coming should happen, they can invoke it at will. That they can summon the Messiah, meaning they could kick a war off, an Armageddon, so-called Armageddon off, just to do that. This is how insane these people are. So maybe you believe in that. I'm not bashing your beliefs. What I'm saying is that's what they believe. Very scary times when you think about it, that because there is no rationality there. It's fanaticism at that point, right? So that said, that's where the Russians have us right now, is that they pretty much, at this point, have Syria locked down. There's no way, the Iraqis are not going along with the U.S. on, I mean, think about it this way. The U.S. just killed 20 Iraqi soldiers that were fighting ISIS. What do you think that's going to do in Iraq? So they've lost Iraq. So now you have Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Iran all working together. This means, the anti-caliphate, so to speak, is going to be impenetrable. These people know they have to work together now. They have no choice, because if they don't, and even Jordan is kind of on the fence in a lot of ways, because they know if they don't work together, that while the Iraqis know better than anybody, and the same with the Afghanis, they know what happens if you don't go along with the democracy JDAMs, right? So that said, every economist on the planet, even in the mainstream media, is predicting a very kind of grim year economically in 2016. I say February is the month to watch. I think in February, when we start to really see the full effects of winter, we're going to see an economic turn down. Maybe not so much a global collapse. I still stick with what I've been saying from day one: no global collapse until war comes. But the problem is they can't seem to get the war started. And mind you, that's good for us. But I also say make sure you have a lot of food and stuff to wait out the storm, and seeds and stuff like that, because when it all does collapse, I mean, there's going to be a lot of desperate, crazy people out there that are going to be more than willing to go to war with other countries, because they're not. It's going to be an act of desperation. Oh, Russia attacked us. Oh, China attacked us. The Russians and the Chinese, their eyes on the prize. They just have to sit and wait for it. So in other words, the Russians are probably going to be willing to get more airplanes shot down, but they're also going to ramp up the rhetoric to fear the rest of the world, so that everybody's looking at it and saying, whoa, you got the Russians ready to shoot nuclear weapons at us. And if you've been listening to the idiots in the Congress, all they talk about is going to war with Russia. People are saying, you're willing to risk, even Donald Trump said it, and this is why people like Donald Trump. It's not because he's the greatest guy in the world. It's just, he's unapologetic, and yes, he is a Zionist compliant guy to a point, but he's not bought off, so there might be hope, who knows. But he did say, you're willing to risk going to war with the Russians so that they don't destroy ISIS? Like, no matter how do you put a spin on it? You can't put a spin on it. It's impossible to put a spin on that. It's as literal as that. We are going to go to World War III for ISIS, over ISIS, because the Zionists can't get their way and overthrow Assad. But Assad's now, he's, and I'm only saying that he's probably saying this, that he is willing to shoot down NATO aircraft because he's got the green light probably from Russia. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. That's why they haven't done it to this date. Think about how many times I've mentioned, if you've been following this channel, I don't know what, 24, 25 times that the Israelis have struck, Syrian army. I mean, you can watch it on RT, you can watch it on all these alternate media. Syrian army near the Israeli border fighting ISIS, and all of a sudden the Israelis are shooting at the Syrian army and not the ISIS guys. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so openly exposed. So the question is, well, why don't the Syrian guys fight back? Why doesn't the Syrian army shoot back at Israel? Well, it's very simple. They don't want. They are using a very, very sophisticated strategy that doesn't make sense to a lot of people, and it might even look cowardice in some ways, saying, oh, they're not going to fight back because they don't want to get wiped out. And that is true. They don't want to get wiped out. But the Syrians are smart. They're not stupid. They know that until Russia says, you touch the Syrian army, we will retaliate to anything that takes out the Syrian army, which they kind of have said that. The Syrians now know the Russians are backing them 100%. That means if Israel flies into Syria and hits Assad's forces, and they shoot down an Israeli jet, okay, the rest of the world's going to say, well, why were you attacking Assad's forces? They're fighting ISIS. So it's just, and I mean, obviously it's so exposed now that ISIS is the proxy army for, there's people out there that still don't want to believe it, and I understand that. I totally understand. I don't like the idea that even here in Canada, there's a good possibility that we've been supporting ISIS as well. Although it doesn't seem to be, and I'm not just saying this because I'm Canadian and trying to defend my, morally defend my country. No, our government is just as corrupt. Trust me. We're in the Ukraine when we shouldn't be. I just, we're kind of like on the fringes of whatever it is we're going to do there. Now with Syria, I don't think we were arming the rebels at any given point, but who knows? I don't know. I'm sure somebody will send me links if say, yeah, the Canadians sent them this, sent them that. However, Canada did strike, was a part of a strike as well that killed either Syrian army or Iraqi army a week or two ago. So I'd hate to think our pilots were being used like that. You know, maybe this is why Justin Trudeau wants to pull you know, the pilots out. If that's the case, that's fine. But remember, even though Justin Trudeau has come out and said he'll be neutral on the Israel question, unlike Harper, where Harper was, a devout Zionist, the thing is that Justin Trudeau knows how quick that the thing can turn on him, and it's going to turn on him anyway, just because for a guy who was a school teacher, he doesn't understand how math works. 2 plus 2 don't make 5, and yes, you might try to get the moral high ground with making all the Syrian refugees instant citizens as soon as they get here and giving them tens of thousands of dollars, but he's going to alienate the Canadian public. And the other thing too is when it comes to paying for it all, there's no way to pay for all this stuff, right? So that's where he's going to lose out. But that's another story for another time. But when it comes to these military things, if we become more non-interventionist, that is kind of good for us, because these wars are fraudulent anyway. Now, some people will say, well, yeah, but we got to fight ISIS. No, we don't. We've got the Syrian army, we've got the Russians, we've got the Hezbollah, we've got the Lebanese, we've communist army, we've got the Iranians. They got enough guys. You got the Kurds. You got enough guys. We could support them to a degree, but even at that, it's like we shouldn't have been in there in the first place. Yes, the world leaders have to go to jail. That's the minimum. Most of them deserve the death penalty for the death and destruction that they have caused through U.S. foreign policy, and I think those days are coming. It's just I want to see the legal process play out. Yes, the system is corrupt, but from within a corrupt system, we can corrupt it to do the right thing. It's just a matter of getting through the right law enforcement and military, and I know they're out there, and I know they are trying. It's just, remember, they are working against a system that's working against humanity. But at the end of the day, the Russians have basically just played a hell of a trump card here, saying that if you strike anything of ours in Syria, even if we can't get there in time, the retaliation is going to be massive. So this is why Putin made the statement of making it very public for the world to know our nuclear forces are 95% ready. They're ready, capable. That's all ballistic missiles, all submarine launch, all submarines, all bomber aircraft, all mobile missile systems, you name it. They are ready. The S-500 missile system will intercept any sort of nuclear missiles coming in. It will be not impossible to hit Russia with nukes, but it will be very hard to take them out with nukes, because they can retaliate against anything we got. That's the whole point they're making, is that they have the upper hand right now. Now, maybe there's some out there say, yeah, but there could be these secret space weapons, black project weapons. That's true too. But there's another thing you have to factor in. Even if the U.S. had top secret stuff that we don't know about that could trump anything the Russians have, there's still that pitchfork revolution from within. That this is probably the biggest fear, the biggest weapon Russia has against the U.S. government is the people of the United States. And I'm sure the Zionists realize this. That popular opinion is on Putin's side for a reason, because the public is on his side. Now, I'm not saying Putin isn't playing both sides. This could be all theater that we're watching, leading us up to a war that, and it's after the war you figure out. You look at who all the new billionaires are, you'll find out what happened. Same after World War I, same after World War II, that type of thing. But the big thing is that if the Russians wanted to get a war going, they could have gotten it going right away. They could have done it, to get people to demand a war is impossible now. They've lost that momentum, in the West. So it wouldn't make sense to try to manipulate for war now, because 60% of the people of the United States don't believe the mainstream media. They don't believe them at all. It means alternative media is beyond taking over. And I can guarantee you, if the United States initiates the war with Russia or China, that's it. There'll be a U.S. uprising so fast, which right now, there kind of is things going on in the States that's not being covered, like the Black Lives Matter thing. There was this wasn't Black Lives Matter, but you see those people going around really provoking racial hatred and stuff like that. It is a George Soros funded group. But the thing is if you follow a guy, yeah, you can call him racist bigot if you want, but call him Flaherty. Uh, just follow his daily posts, and you see all these black mob violence. And again, I'm not trying to demonize all black people. It is a minority of the population doing it, but it is a big problem that's being used to create, basically destabilization in the United States. In other words, a civil race war. And you had 2,000 black youths in Kentucky the other night going around, fighting and doing all kinds of stuff. And I think within that week there was something like 14 black mob violence. People 500, 600. None of it makes the mainstream media, and people are picking up on this. So a lot of people are understanding that this is mental conditioning that comes from the brainwashing of the white privilege and all that stuff, and all the propaganda of hate whites, hate whites, hate whites. So even a lot of people, black people, are picking up on this too, saying, "Oh, these race-based politics, these race pimps are really setting us up for massive disaster." And they can see that the point is everybody's being attacked at every level, but there are willing participants that know not what they do. Right? These are what communists would refer to as useful idiots. Now that said, useful idiots only work if they're useful. So yes, you want to have a distraction of the civil race war in the states, which I think you're going to see something spectacular happen. I'm not saying it's all going to come to head in 2016, but I think we're just going to see bizarreness from bizarreness from bizarreness. It's just, okay, this incident, like, how the hell did that happen? Again, 2,000 kids take into a street fight, throwing firecrackers, some say gunshots, whatever. The other day there was like 5 people shot in the middle of Seattle or some place like that in a big mob uprising. So yeah, those are the people that are going to snap first. Those are the people that are going to come out. The masses aren't going to do that right away. They need something really desperate. Uh, and I don't know exactly what will be planned. Will it be false flag? It doesn't really matter if it's false flag because it's orchestrated in the sense that these are byproducts. The destabilization is byproducts of bad economy, which is done on purpose by the Zionists so that they can get a war going. Basically, we're creating the conditions of World War II just before World War II. Even Jacob Rothschild said that in 2014. Henry Kissinger is already out there about 6 months ago talking about how the United States is, destabilized the Ukraine and, overthrew the government in Ukraine and, arms ISIS. And the thing is this is the guy that usually gets this stuff done. So he's telling us that for a reason. And he's not lying. He's telling us that for a reason. He's doing it to purposely provoke the people. So why provoke the people? Well, again, you need martial law to lock down, but you need a foreign attack to justify more war. The terrorist attacks aren't getting enough war. However, over in Europe, you're seeing what I call right now. There's like a ban in France. Well, it was not technically France, but we'll say France. Um, you know, to do anti-Muslim protests. And something I've been saying, not to be mean, but Muslims, Western countries will be dangerous places for Muslims in the near future. It's the propaganda is going to, it is what it is, right? But the thing is you have these people that are defying civil disobedience in France, going ahead and basically having a protest against Muslims, that type of thing. So we're seeing all this stuff, this 10th Crusade kind of pick up and all that, and we're seeing it all play out. But anyway, I'm going to leave it at about that. So if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Links down below. Thank you very much to everybody who has. Rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing, and have yourselves a great day. G'day, hi, and welcome. All right, World War III update. This one's going to be interesting. Uh, wow, where do I start with this one? Now, you're going to have to kind of keep a bit of an open mind on this because even though I myself do not argue from a religious point of view, I know others do, but we also have to factor in not so much we believe ourselves or don't believe ourselves, but what others may, and some of the people in power, what they actually might believe, from anything from the second coming of Christ, anything from satanic beliefs, any sort of thing like that, or they may have no belief systems at all, or they might be believing in Muslim end times prophecies. We have to factor all these things in. I just want to put it out there because I know some people tend to want to shut off as soon as things start getting religious, but what I'm saying is this is the world we live in, and we have to factor in everything that's going on, because it is all significant. Even the minute details might not seem like much, but it could be a huge catalyst for what I think in 2016 we're probably going to see something spectacular. And I'm not saying that in a, oh wow, hey, that's great. I'm saying we're going to see something that's going to shock and awe us. We're going to see something I'm almost guaranteed will have to make the mainstream media news everywhere. There will be no avoiding it whatsoever because of what's currently going on. Now, it seems like things have died down for the Christmas holidays, but they haven't. In fact, everything's going full bore. In fact, things are really going full bore. Uh, about a week ago, John Kerry made another trip to Russia, and this was pretty much probably on the heels of statements from Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, after the Russian jet got shut down, talked about the stab in the back by Turkey and et cetera, et cetera. Turkey right now is building up, missile defense systems. They got tanks going. They're scrambling in panic right now as they're dealing with the Kurdish uprising. Which, if you haven't been noticing, the Kurdish uprising is starting to get a little bit more public now. And there's a unique thing happening in Turkey, where the East, the West, everybody is right now bashing Turkey. In other words, Turkey just got thrown under the bus as a scapegoat. What that means is that NATO, yes, technically is still, Turkey is still a part of NATO, but NATO is kind of squirming away slowly from Turkey. You had the removal of the F-15, U.S. F-15 jets that were stationed in Turkey. They came home. Media all over the place is kind of bashing Turkey for supporting ISIS. Pilots in the U.S. military are really ticked off, in the Air Force, that have been told for the past year and a half that even some of them have been blowing the whistle, apparently saying that they were not allowed to attack the oil convoys. Obama's excuse was he didn't want to increase global warming. Literally, that was the excuse. It was he didn't want to impact the environment. That's why they didn't want to go after the oil. No, they didn't want to go after the oil because the oil is where they're making the money. Going across to Turkey, selling that oil and et cetera, and funding ISIS. So pretty much, U.S. media, European media, all Russian media are all pretty much fingering Turkey right now, and this is significant. This is very significant because this is also what I said, and again I said this a long time, even before the Russians got into Syria, that they would get into Syria, start at one end of the country, and just sweep the whole damn thing and fleece it free of jihadists, and countries around it would pay the consequences for this. There's no doubt about that, because you have jihadists. The United Nations apparently just was delayed in removing basically, you might as well say, ISIS fighters from Aleppo. Basically, moderate rebels. They still call them moderate rebels, right? But they said they were going to be delayed for that 24-hour or 48 or 72-hour ceasefire that Assad had, basically giving people amnesty to get out of there. But they said these jihadists can't get out of there, and basically the United Nations can't get them out. So why would they want to get them out? You know what I mean? That's the thing. Another thing is, and I don't know much about this man at all, but a journalist in Turkey was just assassinated, basically shot in the face, I guess from point blank, from a bunch of people in a vehicle that was exposing the ISIS ring with Turkey. Now, you have to understand also in Turkey that it's very, the Kurdish uprisings are getting very, very violent. So I'm thinking what's going to happen in Turkey is they're just, this could be the Russians, maybe they'll back the Kurds on the other end. But you also have the Iraqis out there that are basically not going along with the U.S. Remember a couple of months ago, the United States told the Iraqis that if they open their borders to the Russians, uh, they may treat Iraq, basically as a hostile nation again. But the Iraqis haven't bid on this. They're like, what have they got to lose at this point, right? So they're still out there, talking about these airdrops going into to arm the rebels. Again, they're showing all these weapons that are making it. These aren't things that the rebels are just coming across naturally or stealing. No, these are being airdropped by helicopter, low level, meaning you can't mistake who you're dropping to, because if let's put it to you this way, and if you're a surface veteran, you know this. Let's say you're flying along in a Chinook, a Huey, or a Black Hawk, okay, and you're at, I don't know, we'll say 500 feet. What happens to your helicopter as soon as you fly over hostile jihadists? They shoot at you, right? They'll shoot at you with whatever they got. They'll throw rocks at you. They'll yell at, they'll try anything. So you're not going to be flying above the building tops, above these jihadists without being shot at. So these helicopters are not getting shot at. There's no reports of these helicopters getting shot at. So there's only one reason why these helicopters are not getting shot at, because they're dropping off supplies. And this is what the Iraqis have been talking about. And there is some footage of it. Yes, I get it. It disappears quickly. Again, we are in a media war as well. But there's another thing, is the Iraqis, they're still trying, they're still angry about the Turks invading their country. They're like, we don't want your help, we don't want you here because you guys basically support ISIS. So that's going on. All this stuff is going on, and it's really exposing how failed the plan is. But that's not the big news. The big news is that Vladimir Putin apparently went to Israel, and in the last past week or so, to basically, from this guy's more conspiracy theory, and I can't vet anything he was saying, but he was saying something along the lines of to stop World War III. So, okay, fair enough. I can't vet that at all, right? So what I can vet is the reaction Putin had of the shooting down of the Russian jet a few weeks ago, when he then had S-300, S-400, and now coming online in Russia is the S-500 missile system. All these things are